When you play your favorite song on Spotify, the artist makes 0.3 of 1 cent. Spotify keeps the rest. A song that reaches 1 million streams, a genuine hit by any normal measure, pays out $3,000 total. Split across the artist, the songwriter, the label, the producer, the distributor, and the publisher before anyone sees a check. Last year, Spotify paid the music industry $11 billion. 751 million people use the platform, 290 million paying $11 a month for premium. Those numbers sound enormous, and they are enormous. They also obscure what every artist on the platform actually receives, which, except at the very top, is structurally small. Taylor Swift, the most streamed artist on Spotify, has earned an estimated $484 million across 121 billion lifetime streams. Most artists you listen to may never receive a single check. The fundamental question this episode answers is not whether Spotify is good or bad for artists. The question is where the $11 billion actually goes after Spotify sends it. The answer is the most important contract structure in modern music, and most people who pay $11 a month for Spotify Premium do not know it exists. The first thing to understand about Spotify's payment model is that Spotify does not pay per stream in the way most people assume. There is no fixed price that Spotify owes for each play of a song. Instead, Spotify uses what is called a Pro-Rata Pool model. Every month, Spotify takes the total revenue it collected from premium subscriptions and advertising, removes its own operating share, and pools the remaining amount. That pooled amount is then divided across all rights holders based on each rights holder's share of total streams that month. If a particular artist's tracks account for 1% of all streams on the platform in a given month, that artist's rights holders receive approximately 1% of the month's payable pool. This has a specific consequence that most listeners do not realize. The $11 you pay for premium does not go to the artists you listen to. It goes into the pool. The artists you listen to receive a share of the pool calculated by their global stream share, not by your listening behavior. Spotify's published share is approximately 70% of revenue paid out to rights holders, with the remaining 30% retained by Spotify for operations, technology, and profit. The 70% figure varies. Spotify's SEC filings disclose that royalty rates are negotiated separately with each major label, and that the share depends on metrics including premium subscriber count, the ratio of free users to premium, and country-specific rates. The 30% that stays with Spotify funds the platform, the servers, the engineering team, the licensing legal work, the recommendation algorithms, the editorial playlist staff, the marketing, and generates the company's operating margin. Once Spotify sends the 70% share to rights holders, the second deduction layer begins. For the vast majority of music on the platform, the rights holder receiving Spotify's payment is not the artist. It is the artist's record label. Universal Music Group, Sony Music Entertainment, and Warner Music Group. The three major labels collectively account for the majority of Spotify's payable streams. When Spotify pays for a streamed track from a major label artist, the entire payment goes to the label first. The label then distributes a share of that payment to the artist according to the contract the artist signed when they were signed to the label. Standard major label recording contracts in recent years have paid artists between 15 and 25% of streaming revenue after recoupment of advances. Older contracts, many of which remain in force, pay even less, sometimes as low as 10%. The contract terms include recoupment provisions, any advances the label paid the artist when signing them, any recording costs the label covered, any marketing budgets the label deployed, must be earned back from the artist's share before the artist receives a check. This is the structural reason why an artist who appears commercially successful, whose songs are everywhere, whose stream counts run into the hundreds of millions, can still be in unrecouped status with their label, receiving no royalty payments at all. The label has the money. The label is keeping it against the artist's recoupable balance. Once the balance reaches zero, the artist starts receiving payments. For many mid-tier artists, that day never arrives within their first contract cycle. independent artists who release through distributors rather than major labels keep a substantially larger share, 50 to 100% of the per-stream payout, depending on the distribution deal. The structural difference between major label and independent economics is one of the largest variables in modern music industry finance. In April 2024, Spotify changed its payment model in a way that affected approximately 95% of the songs on the platform. The change was simple to state. Any track that did not reach 1,000 streams in the previous 12 months would no longer generate recording royalties at all. Streams of those tracks would still be counted, still be added to the platform's total, still be part of the user's listening data, but the per-stream payments those tracks would have generated would instead be redistributed to tracks that did clear the 1,000 stream threshold. Spotify's stated rationale was that the change targets noise uploads, automated bot content, and tracks designed to game the payment system at scale. According to Spotify, 99.5% of all streams come from tracks above the threshold, so the policy primarily affects content that contributes minimally to user listening. The structural effect of the policy is meaningful even at small per-track scale. A track with 800 streams in a 12-month period, meaningful listening, real audience, generates zero payment under the new model. The money that would have gone to that track is added to the pool for the larger acts. Independent artists, debut releases, niche genre tracks, and emerging songwriters are statistically more likely to fall below the threshold than established acts. The policy concentrates payment to the upper tier of streamed tracks. The volume of music affected is approximately 62.5 million tracks under the threshold as of mid-2024, out of roughly 100 million tracks on the platform. Whether the policy is a fair anti-fraud measure or a structural transfer from emerging artists to established artists depends on which side of the threshold a particular track sits. In November 2020, Spotify launched a product called Discovery Mode. The mechanic is straightforward. An artist or label can flag certain tracks for promotion through Spotify's recommendation algorithms. Specifically in radio, autoplay, and certain algorithmic mixes, in exchange for accepting a 30% reduction in royalty payments for streams generated through those promotional channels. The artist gets more streams. Each stream pays 30% less. Spotify gets a higher operating margin on the boosted streams and retains the difference. Spotify's public position is that Discovery Mode is a marketing tool the artist freely chooses, that it does not affect editorial playlists like Discover Weekly or Release Radar, and that it is clearly disclosed within Spotify's policy documentation. Critics, including the Recording Academy, the Worldwide Independent Network, and music industry analysts, have argued that Discovery Mode functions as a modern form of payola. Payola was the practice in 1950s and 60s radio of paying disc jockeys to play specific songs, which was outlawed by the United States Congress in 1960. The Recording Academy publicly compared Discovery Mode to payola in 2021. In November 2025, a class action lawsuit was filed in federal court in Manhattan, alleging that Discovery Mode misleads listeners by presenting paid placement as algorithmic recommendation. In April 2026, the Texas Attorney General launched a formal payola investigation targeting Spotify, Apple Music, Pandora, Amazon Music, and YouTube Music, sending civil investigative demands to each company. The legal question of whether Discovery Mode constitutes payola is unresolved as of the time of this episode. The structural mechanic, however, is well documented and not in dispute. Artists trade royalty rate for algorithmic exposure. The trade is not visible to the listener. The 30% rate reduction goes to Spotify's margin. The mechanics described so far, pro-rata pooling, label deductions, the threshold, discovery mode, apply to all artists on the platform. But the practical outcome of those mechanics is heavily concentrated at the top of the streaming distribution. The most streamed artist on Spotify, Taylor Swift, with 121 billion lifetime-led track streams, has earned approximately $484 million from Spotify over her catalog's lifetime, using the 0.4% average rate as a working estimate. That number is gross to her rights holders before label deductions and her own contract specifics. Below the very top tier, the curve is steep. An artist with 50 million lifetime streams, substantial commercial success, generates approximately $200,000 in gross streaming revenue over their entire career to date. Split with a label at 20% post-recoupment, that's $40,000 to the artist. Split with a co-writer, a producer, a manager, that's substantially less. A streaming hit does not produce a streaming livelihood for most artists. Established analysis from the Music Industry Research Association, the Future of Music Coalition, and academic researchers at major universities consistently shows that the median Spotify artist with at least some commercial traction earns less than $1,000 per year from streaming royalties. The platform's revenue is enormous. The platform's per-artist payment, except at the very top, is structurally small. This is the mathematical fact under every conversation about streaming. The platform isn't choosing to underpay artists. The arithmetic of pro-rata distribution across 100 million tracks does. The pro-rata pool is not the only possible streaming payment model. The most discussed alternative is called the user-centric model. The mechanic is simple. Each individual subscriber's monthly payment is allocated only to the artists that specific subscriber actually listened to that month, distributed in proportion to their share of that subscriber's listening time. If you listen exclusively to one artist for a month, the payable portion of your subscription fee goes entirely to that artist. If you listen across 50 artists, your fee is split 50 ways. The user-centric model has been studied by the major streaming services. Deezer in France launched a partial version of it in 2021. Spotify has not adopted it. The reason is structural. Under pro-rata, a single subscriber's $11 is pooled with 750 million other monthly user subscriptions, and the entire pool is distributed by global stream share. The top 1% of artists, who collectively account for approximately 90% of all streams, receive approximately 90% of the pool, including subscribers' money who never listen to them. Under user-centric, that redistribution stops. The subscriber who only listens to independent jazz pays only independent jazz artists. The subscriber who only listens to the top 40 pays only top 40 acts. Top-tier artists would lose substantial revenue under user-centric because they currently capture money from listeners who didn't choose them. Mid-tier and niche artists would gain because they would receive their own listeners' money in full. Whether user-centric is more fair depends on whose perspective is taken. The major label industry has lobbied against it. The streaming services have been cautious. The current pool model persists because, in the words of an industry analyst writing for Billboard, it is the model the people with the most money want to keep. What we have walked through is the structural reality of streaming royalties. Spotify generates approximately $50 billion in annual revenue, pays out approximately $11 billion to rights holders, and reaches over 750 million users monthly. Per stream, the platform pays between 3 and 4/10 of 1 cent. That payment flows first to the rights holder, usually a record label, not the artist. The label deducts its contractual share, recoups any advances and recording costs, and pays the artist what remains, if anything remains. Tracks below 1,000 streams per year are excluded from the payment system entirely. Tracks enrolled in discovery mode receive 30% less per stream in exchange for algorithmic boost. The result, at the artist level, is a steep power law distribution. A few hundred acts at the top of the platform capture the majority of payouts. The vast middle and long tail earn modest sums or nothing. The entire structure is legal, disclosed in Spotify's SEC filings and policy documents, and rational from every party's perspective. Spotify maintains its operating margin. Labels protect their contract terms. Artists at the top earn enormous sums. Listeners pay $11 a month for unlimited access to nearly all recorded music. The question of whether the structure is fair to artists below the top tier is, by any honest analysis, a separate question from whether the structure is functioning as designed. It is functioning. The $11 you pay each month is doing the work the architects intended. Whether the architects intended the right thing, that is the conversation the music industry has been having for the past 15 years, and the answer keeps depending on who is making the payment and who is receiving it. Subscribe for more of the economics behind the systems and products that shape everyday life.